This podcast is brought to you by the Commercial Space Project Group of the Space Generation Advisory Council. The Space Generation Advisory Council, in support of the United Nations Programme on Space Applications, is a global, non-governmental, non-profit organization and network which aims to connect and represent university students and young space professionals to the United Nations, space agencies, industry, and academia. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Commercial Space Project Group podcast. I'm your host, Zovinara Vakyan, and today we have a truly special guest. Joining us is Nahum Romero Zamora, an incredible artist, musician, and the founder of the Kosmica Institute, an organization that explores the intersection of art, culture, and space. In this episode, we'll dive into the role of culture in the commercial space sector, the importance of creative projects in space entrepreneurship, and how non-traditional players can create their own paths in the industry. So without further ado, let's get started. Hello Nahum, and thank you so much for joining us today. Let's start with a little introduction. Could you please introduce yourself and tell us about the Kosmica Institute?
Well, again, hello. Thank you for the invitation. Very happy to be here. And yes, I'm an artist, and I also founded the Kosmica Institute, which, as you described, is this space organization dedicated to all the artistic, cultural aspects of space activities and about how they have an impact on our planet, in our culture. And also we explore our personal and individual connections with the cosmos. So we've been around for more than a decade, and we are this point that brings together these two sides, no? Like the humanities and the arts, no? So we work a lot with museums, other arts organizations, and academia, with the space sector, no? Space organizations, both private and public, and also with some space education organizations, such as the International Space University, no? For example.
Well, I noticed that Kosmica Institute does a truly diverse range of work. I mean, you have events, exhibitions, online courses, and so much more. What is your approach to connecting with people, choosing the right professionals, and building partnerships?
Well, it's yeah, our activities are always very fluid, no? Like we are always like trying different programs and doing the things that we feel are right. In the past, we were doing like monthly events in London. Then we moved into festivals. Then we were very interested in educational programs and then working with migrants and refugees and then doing expeditions and then doing some online activities. So we're always adapting and finding new ways to deliver programs. And at the end of the day, as we know in the space community, it's a very small community, and when you talk about the arts and the humanities, it's exactly the same, no? Like people that are dedicated like full time doing this work, it's like, we can identify them. Uh, but yes, it also happens to be a very international community. So that's why we find that online activities are really good. In the past, when we were doing the festivals, we were like flying, like 20 people from different parts of the world, and I was a little bit conflicted about that, about flying someone from Australia for a 40-minute talk, like as much as I believe it's beautiful and important to be, in flesh in front of people or an audience. I also believe that, yeah, it's time to rethink this kind of activities because at the end of the day, we only have this planet.
Yeah, absolutely. Sustainability should be a key factor in how we organize events, and virtual options can really help with that. And your institute is very unique, and I wanted to ask you, what opportunities do you see for new players to enter the space economy? particularly from non-traditional sectors like art and culture?
I think, well, when it comes to the so-called space economy, uh, I think I think there is I mean this is my personal take, and something that artists are good are at questioning things, right? So I'm going to be critical in the with the best of intentions. I think right now there is there is a miss opportunity about a lot of the things that we are projecting into these space futures, if you will. And one of them is definitely the space economy, as it just replicates, or better said, is a continuity of models that the economic model that we have in our planet. What I would like to see is how we use, in the same way that we're developing the latest technology and science to put things in orbit or even beyond, why we don't also innovate with different economic models, no? That are able to be more just, more fair, instead of privatizing or looking for extractivist activities that will benefit just a handful of people. And for this, I think that one of the best laboratories of ideas of new models is definitely science fiction. No, like, and there are people that have been working in different models that could work. And I always like to think that space is a blank canvas, no, where we shouldn't necessarily do everything as we have done it on Earth, but it's a place where we can experiment with new ways of doing things. So when it comes to the space economy, I think we are missing the the good opportunity, no, the interesting adventure, and instead we are just copy pasting things.
Space as a black canvas is so beautifully put, and I absolutely love how you mentioned sci fi as a source of inspiration. However, if we're talking about the present moment and the financial models that are currently in use, do you think there is enough funding in the space sector for cultural and creative projects? How can businesses convince investors of their value, and what advice would you give to entrepreneurs seeking investment for unconventional space related projects?
I mean, this is something um, that it can benefit both, no? Like entrepreneurs that are developing new technologies and artists, no? Like normally, if you are, and this is where I can see a lot of potential for arts, science, tech collaborations in the space sector, and that is normally, like people developing their businesses or their technologies, they need to test them eventually, no? And many of them, for example, in Europe, many organizations, they apply to Horizon funding, which is public funding at the end of the day. So a good mix is that you develop something with public funding, and then instead of immediately jumping into a business application, you invite an artist, that can develop a project using this technology and really try to push all the buttons, and to even to add some stress into this technology and explore the possibilities of what could be done with this technology. And then artists are always really good at pushing the envelope and exploring different angles. And I'm saying this as a
Thank you,
personal,
really.
yeah, as a personal example, no. Space application systems, when they were developing the Ice Cube service for the ISS, no, they wanted a project that that could be more in the artist side and not necessarily commercial, and I started working with them, no, to make an artwork, and that's what we did, no. We were able to link in real time the ice cube facility in the ISS and people's heartbeats on Earth, no. So at the end of the day, people were able to send their heartbeats into this flashing light in the ISS. And I think that's a good opportunity when it comes to funding. I think public funding is really important for developing space projects, especially because if you put all the burden into investors, I think that the the need of the return of investment and for profits it will be just too aggressive, and then we will be in a then we'll be just like devouring space and the orbit, and next thing that you will know is that everyone will want to have their own constellation, like ancestral night skies will be gone, you know. So yeah, we again we have to be careful with the things that we do in space as the things that we do on this planet. No, history tells us that humans have been very good at developing technologies without fully understanding the impact that they will have in the medium and long term. And same goes for space technologies, no? And putting them in the dynamic of the market, I think will things could go down, a path that we already know in our planet.
Yeah. And so when it comes to underrepresented regions and communities, how can emerging markets or developing countries position themselves to participate in the commercial space economy? And do you see any opportunities for those groups?
I think, well, I think that, um, I mean, that's a difficult question because I, I I wouldn't
I
like
mean,
to see.
do you see any opportunities for space commerce to positively impact those communities and be like a new opportunity for them?
Hmm. It depends what kind of activities, right? I I believe that, for example, this is something that I was telling the Mexican Space Agency when it was like newly founded. I was like, well, it will be very difficult for the Mexican Space Agency to compete with launchers, no, or capsules or even satellites, no, satellites. So something that we could have done is to become an important voice culturally. No, I think there is a lot of regulations and revisions that the outer space treaties need to have, and that no one is like really willing to go there. And um, we still are ruled by laws from the late 60s and early 70s. And I think when it comes to, like having the deep cultural society discussions, that's where we can do a lot, um, to make sure that we will have a fair and just space ecosystem. So I think that would be a really good place to start. Secondly, I think that working regionally is very important. Like individual countries don't need to have their own rockets, no? But I think working regionally, like, and this is, for example, Europe, no? Europe has started, but then the Ariane rocket is like on and off, and it's not um, it's not as robust as not robust, but as consistent as the American new private companies, no, that are launching hundreds of rockets a year. So so I think the power is in regional collaboration and not in nationalisms.
Very interesting. So let's also talk a bit about protecting intellectual property. With the rise of commercial space exploration, how do we protect intellectual property for both creative and scientific innovations, and how can we approach that question differently to improve it?
I mean, what would be the threats of not having it? You know, I think that again, like trying to, to think a few steps ahead. I think that, I'm an artist, so I really believe in the importance of authorship and protecting intellectual property. And and I think that that's a very important concept. Many years ago, I was discussing with some colleagues about, for example, the moon. Like who owns the moon? We know that no one, in theory, can own the moon, but at the same time, Americans are allowed to exploit it and profit from it because they have this strange law. So 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 again, like okay, what it will be very interesting is to change the conversation. So instead of owning parts of space, we go into a model of authoring some parts in space. So imagine that we go to the moon and, like this organization goes there and builds something. Will they own that part of the moon? Maybe they can be the authors of that part of the moon without having to own the the land uh, on the moon. No, so we are switching into, from ownership to authoring. Just as an example, so I think that
Wow.
protection of protection of ideas is important and ownership of ideas, but also to a certain extent, like people that work in software, they know the value of open source, and right now we are seeing um, um, how open source can software and code and ideas can really, like can really progress developments in very interesting ways. And at the end of the day, I think also culture is open source, right? Like the ideas are there, the works are there, and and originalities in the way that you mix things. So there has to be protection, yes, for copycats, but at the same time there has to be distribution and acknowledge that it's the nature of human progress to borrow things, make them your own, and move forward.
Yeah, it's extremely relevant nowadays with the AI and other
Hmm.
technologies like that. And also, when people think of space exploration and doing business in the space sector, SpaceX often is the only thing that comes to mind. And there's a widespread misconception that you need vast resources to enter this field and create a successful project. And as someone who has created something truly unique by combining arts and science in the space sector, what would you say to those who feel that their ideas might be too small or unimportant to make a difference?
I would say, yeah, I mean, space is expensive, right? Like just the fact that you have to send something to orbit, I mean, and that you need a rocket is just insane. I think the first question is, and do you really have to? Like, I think that anything that we aim to do in space has to be meaningful to some point. And I know that there's like a rush in the space economy or in the new space for, like developing things, and everyone wants to have their startup and launch stuff. But there's only as much as we can put in orbit, right? Like just look at all the space junk. There are like millions of particles that are already there. So I think being mindful about the activities that are really going to, to be meaningful. So that's what I would say, I think, and I know it's maybe not the answer that maybe you want to hear, but I really think that we need to be thoughtful and to perhaps slow down a few things that we are doing, and again, we don't have to do things individually. If everyone has their own satellite, we will have billions of satellites, and there's no way we can accommodate that. So I think working in larger projects, at the level of the EU or at the level of regional Africa, I think that's some more that makes more sense personally. And now I think that if if investors and entrepreneurs are looking at space with the aim of becoming the next millionaire, I think that's the wrong reason for doing it. Just work in the stock market and fulfill that ambition. But space can be as fragile as Earth is, and making profits or looking for profits uh, of that magnitude in space can be, I'm suspicious, let's say, like I just look at what is happening to our planet, and to think that that might happen, in a cosmic level, it, I don't know, I get really, really worried. Soon we will be talking about the exactly, yeah, and there's this concept, the anthropocosmos, right? So I think we have to be mindful. There's nothing wrong with doing space activities, but we have to do them right. And sadly, a lot of the conversations that I see today are going in the wrong direction. So again, I'm talking as an artist. I'm talking as someone who who whose job is to ask questions, cultural and critical questions. So that's what I'm doing. I love space, and I love that we are able to do things in space, but I want them to be done, in an ethical and responsible way.
You have just highlighted the importance of ethical considerations in space, and we will explore those considerations in more detail later. But before we move on to that, I'd like to revisit something we talked about during the invitation. I asked you if you also identified as an entrepreneur. So now I'm curious, beyond the necessity of it, do you also enjoy those entrepreneurial challenges? How do you find that balance, and what aspects of that business side do you find fulfilling, especially within such a competitive field?
Okay, thanks for keeping me on track. I love being an entrepreneur, and I love to think that being an artist is all about being entrepreneur, because for me it means that I get to to set my own rules and wake up and be free to do whatever I want to do. And that freedom, it doesn't come for free. You have to have this like entrepreneurial mindset. And it's all about problem solving. It's about, you have an idea and you just see how you make it happen, no? And it's about dealing with problems and obstacles, and I just love that. I think artists are entrepreneurs. They are like solo people in most cases, no? Like today, artists they do everything, no? Like they need how to promote themselves. They need how to have their financial plans, how to have a small team, how to um, yeah, how to make the work. So that's what I do, and I love it. No? You have to create this structure for yourself instead of fitting into someone else's structure, which is also fine. Like not everyone has to be an entrepreneur. Not everyone.
Definitely.
Um, it's a matter of personality and again, personal temperament because it's tough. I think you end up working, I don't know, like 80 hours a week, so to avoid working 40 hours a week, right?
Yeah.
So, but you have to love it, and and you have to have the conviction because it's tough, and sometimes I ask myself like, "Wow, life could be so much easier, but I don't want easy. That's my personal preference.
Mhm.
I like the roller coaster. I like
Freedom
the
that comes with it. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, And at the end of the day, you become comfortable with discomfort.
And you also have full creative freedom to kind of push your ideas and discover new ideas. So, yeah, definitely, I think entrepreneurship is kind of an art form as well. And on your website, there's a quote that resonated with me on a very deep level, which says, "We don't need growth, we need depth." First, I would love to hear your interpretation of that phrase, and building on that, how do you see the future of space business sector balancing the drive for growth with the need for meaningful depth, whether it's in innovation, cultural impact, or ethics? And specifically, what ethical considerations do you believe businesses must prioritize to ensure not just growth, but also the preservation and enrichment of humanity's future?
Well, for many years, I've been thinking, what's the alternative for growth? Like where does it come from? And I don't know, we can speculate a lot about, is it because, we things seem to move forward and things we always strive for things to get better, to have more, to be more, and which okay, we can speculate again where it comes from, but why? Again, like asking the profound questions. Why do we need growth? Why we have, why we think that birth rates have to be more and more and more? Why do we need to expand ourselves, like talking about humanity, into other places of the universe? Why? Why do companies have to make more profit? Why do economies have to grow eternally when when at the end of the day, you know, I hate this word, but resources are limited. The planet is 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 not infinite. Um, there are boundaries, and there are limitations, and there are balances, and there are equilibriums. So, what will be the alternative of growth? Is it equilibrium? Is it balance? And I wrote depth, as my personal take, and that means let's just go deep into a few things that we do as humanity. If we start going deep into engaging with this planet, we might find that is quite incredible, right? I'm really against these philosophies that say, uh, let's forget about Earth. Earth is a thing of the past. Let's move on to Mars. It's it's nonsense. Why should we move to a poisonous environment when we have everything here? Um, of course, one thing is exploration, but another thing is expansion. So let's just go deep. And if we're going to explore, let's explore deeply. But let's go deep instead of like this this fast pacing that we have, no? Like we have fast content, short content. I think that going deep into one activity, into one practice, into one relationship, will heal a lot the toxic relationships we have with each other, with information, with the planet, with space. And that's when you start appreciating more life and existence and our interconnectedness. So so that's what I think, I don't think in infinite growth. I believe in depth, uh, and how that can be implemented practically. Well, I don't have an answer, and in the same way, I wouldn't believe anyone that has that one answer. This has to be a collective work, and it's humanity learning and uh, together and exploring different ways, and different cultures will come up with their own way of doing that. Um, yeah, so that's what I think. It's nothing concrete, but that's human building, right? It's otherwise it's an autocracy where a bunch of white old boring men decide everything for everyone, and that's not how it works.
Yeah. I mean, the space sector is kind of like trendy right now, but sometimes we have to stop and just ask ourselves questions, ourselves why we're doing the things that we're doing. And thank you very much. That brings us to the end of this fascinating conversation with Nahum. I hope you enjoyed exploring the intersection of art, culture, and space commerce as much as I did. And if you found this discussion insightful, make sure to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you for tuning in, and until next time, keep looking up and thinking beyond.